officially call to order because we don't have a quorum. But I'd like to start out with MTS Director reports and Metro Transit General Manager reports, and then we'll see if we get some more council members.
Madam Chair and members, 2 updates today. Today, in a few minutes, we'll mark the end of the TPP public comment period. So we've been, as always with public comment periods, we've been receiving a lot of them at the end, so we're in the process of that. The next step will be for us to compile the comments and come back to this committee and other committees with an update on the public comments before moving it forward towards adoption. As it's past the midpoint in the year, I thought I'd give a brief update on the motor vehicle sales tax. Looking through the first half of the year, we do have some positive numbers. It came in a little bit above the forecasted at 101% of forecast. So it's obviously a key part of our funding for transit, and it's something we watch closely, and it's positive trends in that it's matching up a little bit better than what we had budgeted for the year, so year to date. So that, Madam Chair and members, that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do members have any questions, comments?
Yes, Madam Chair. I wish that Nick would have given me an idea that he had such a short report to make mine seem all that much longer. But first I want to say that Move Minneapolis, the downtown transportation management organization, recently signaled its intent to merge with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber of Commerce. The two organizations are now in negotiations in the hope that the merger will take place in the next 60 to 90 days. As you know, Move Minneapolis receives CMAQ funds through the council to do employer outreach and other TDM activities in downtown Minneapolis. The organization has struggled to find the local match needed to use the federal CMAQ funds, and it appears that the merger with the chamber would help that. It also could strengthen ties to key Minneapolis business leaders to help them advance TDM efforts in downtown. Would you like to take?
Just finished.
Okay, I'll take questions all at once. But the next thing I want to talk about is service changes. If you recall, we made the difficult decision to suspend about 1% of our weekday bus trips on July 31st. That goal was to improve the predictability of our operations and give our customers more confidence in our service as we continue to work on addressing our operator shortage. Well, the next regularly scheduled service changes take effect this Saturday. To maintain the improved reliability we've seen over the last few weeks, we want to maintain this level of service in the next round of changes. Some of the trips that were suspended in July will be reinstated, but others are being eliminated. Like the July 31st trip suspensions, we sought to minimize the impact on our customers by eliminating trips where alternatives are available. Our online schedules and trip planners have been adjusted accordingly, and customers on affected routes will receive texts and email alerts. We'll also be posting updated information on our shelters. Unfortunately, because of the sequence events, our printed schedules will have some outdated information on these affected routes. Updated printed schedules will be distributed in December when the next round of service changes will be taking effect. To support our hiring effort, we are offering $500 referral bonus to all employees. The bonus will be provided to any employee who refers a bus route operator candidate who gets through their probationary period. And then finally, Madam Chair, members, we're less than 10 days away from the Minnesota State Fair, an event that you'll hear more about a little bit later in the agenda, and we look forward to serving this fun, festive occasion every year. As you know, we will provide express bus service from park and rides throughout the region with varying levels of service. Discounted group and individual fares will continue to be sold through our website and at our service centers until the start of the fair, and will be available throughout our app, until the fair ends. We are also looking forward to serving several other large events in the coming weeks, including preseason Vikings games and a pair of large concerts at U.S. Bank Stadium. As you recall, overlapping activities at the end of September or last summer led to a single-day ridership record on our light rail lines. As before, we do our best to match our service levels to accommodate this increased demand. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions from committee members? Thank you very much. I mean, we've covered this before, but it's a shame we had to make some changes to trim state fair service, but I personally did not understand the extraordinary effort that Metro Transit has to put in to make that successful, so I appreciate that every year.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think you'll get even a better perspective of how many additional buses and operators it takes to keep this annual tradition alive, and this year it's going to be an additional heavy lift. We do have some additional announcements today, including we have added weekend service to the Newport Park and Ride, and we hope to be able to kind of blend that with the corridor approach for the Park and Ride that we already are serving at Cottage Grove a little bit further to the south.
Very good. So now we can bring the meeting to order, call to order the meeting of the Transportation Committee for Monday, August 13th. And first up is approval of the agenda. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda is approved. Next up is approval of the minutes for July 23rd, 2018. Are there any changes or comments? Otherwise, a motion is in
Move
order.
approval, Madam Chair. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the minutes are approved. We already had reports. I did have some folks sign up. I don't know if anyone wanted to address the Transportation Committee tonight. If you do, now is your chance. Takers? Okay, very good. Our first business item is we have one item on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Support. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our first non-consent business item is 2018-182, and it's the Hayward Garage Modernization Construction Contract. And Robert Rimstick is here. And also, and I'm sorry.
Robert will introduce.
There you go. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. Again, I'm Robert Rimstead. I'm a lead project manager with the Metro Transit Engineering Facilities, and today I bring with me our recently newly hired Carrie Desmond, who will be taking over this project. It's her second week. She came to us from the private consulting firm WSP, and in her previous career, she had worked on the high-speed rail project from St. Louis to Illinois, kind of from the very beginning stages of the design and environmental documentation, and then all the way through construction and implementation. So she brings a wealth of experience with us, and I'm excited to bring her on board and be able to hand off some of these projects and let her take them over. But I'll be handling the presentation today. So with that, the business item today is to seek authorization to award a construction contract for the Hayward Garage Modernization. And so this project is to update the garage to accommodate the current bus fleet mix and the additional staff since this was built in the 80s. So originally the garage was built in 1984 and it was designed for around 210 40-foot buses. Now we have about 245 buses with a mix of 40-foot, 60-foot, and coach buses. And a 60-foot bus takes about 1.5 times as much space as a 40-foot bus. So we've really jammed in as many buses as we possibly can to this garage, and then with the addition to the additional buses, takes more operators and mechanics to operate and maintain those, in addition to the additional service that we do provide over multiple hours of the day, up 24 hours a day. There's a lot more people involved in this site, and so really what this project is going to do is to give the appropriate space for employees and their equipment to be able to better perform their job. Right now, this is probably the largest garage that we have the most buses at that has the small support space for our operators. And also, just with that change in the fleet mix, we need lifts and other equipment that can handle 60-foot buses and a lot of the additional technology and other pieces of equipment that are going on the rooftops of the buses to allow the maintenance staff to keep those up and running. And so just to orient everybody, again to the campus, currently, so this is where the Hayward Garage modernization is going on, the west side of the building. It's currently a parking lot. And then again, we're right here in the Hayward office building and the police building. The other larger red block on there is the planned Minneapolis bus garage or the Hayward 2 garage. And so the overall funding for this project is federal with the RTC match. And we have budgeted for the design, this operations addition of the maintenance improvements, and then we also have additional funding for additional maintenance equipment and furnishings, such as the future replacement of a few older lifts that are original to the building, and then buying the additional furnishings where the workbenches, storage equipment, other mobile equipment that'll be kind of added towards the end of the project. The overall timeline for the project is we did start the design in late 2017. We were able to complete that the second quarter of this year. We received bids in the third quarter of this year, and so we're looking to start construction yet this fall. And with the timing of this would be very similar to the police building that you saw come out of the ground this time last year, is trying to allow that contractor to get on site, get the site prepped, get the foundations in prior to freeze up so that they can spend the time over the winter bringing in the precast concrete and the steel structure to then in the springtime start to fully enclose it. So overall, we're hoping to wrap things up in early 2020. It lengthens out. I think the operations piece will be able to open up in the fall of 19, and operations will be able to move in there. But some of the work in the maintenance shop will take a little bit longer just because we can only give the contractor so many spaces to work in so that we can continue to operate every day out of the facility. So with that, the proposed action is for the Met Council to authorize and award the execution of the construction contract with Roshan for about $9.4 million for this construction. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions from committee members? No? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up is 2018-198, and it is an additional change order authority request for the Blue Line project. And Dan Solar is here to present.
Thanks, Madam Chair, members. I'm Dan Solar, Project Director for Blue Line Extension Project Office. So today, what we are presenting is some information about the contract we had, the advanced construction contract we had to build the Stormwater Tunnel for Blue Line, for the Blue Line Extension Project. So before I go there, I haven't been here for a little bit, so Brian had asked that I put a few pieces, just kind of bring folks, the Transportation Committee, up to speed a little bit about where we are with the Blue Line Extension Project. So I picked a couple of pieces that just are here mostly for information. This slide shows the things we've accomplished through the end of the year. So we've included, I think, as most folks know, we finished all of our environmental work on the project. We finished we are in the FTA engineering program. We've been plowing through design, and we're sitting at about 90% design work on most of the contracts for the project, the civil construction contracts, our OMF building contract, our systems design contract. Have kind of reached that 90% level, and now it becomes a matter of, okay, when do we take them to 100% and when do we get ready to build them? You'll see begin advanced utility work on there in October. That's this advanced utility work for Basset Creek that I'm talking about today. So as we moved into 2018, and 2018 just started, right? It's what now, all of a sudden August. And so we're more than halfway through the year, but as we've plowed through along the year, these are what we now have as the major milestones in front of us. And so based on anybody who's heard me talk about the project over the last few years, there's no real surprises here. Third-party agreements being number one, reaching an agreement with Burlington Northern to utilize the Monticello subdivision for the great majority of the length of this corridor. And once we can put those things in place, then we will bring the plans to 100%, submit our request for a full funding grant agreement, and move that forward. And we're analyzing all the time at the project office what our schedule is and how it's impacted by both everything that's going on today with the federal government and moving projects, as well as still, though, always knowing the ball in front of us is to get to where we're able to complete our work with Burlington Northern. So that kind of sets the stage with where we are. We had made a decision last year that we would move forward with a project that was consisted of advanced pre-award authorization. So we were able to do this work with county and MnDOT dollars with the idea that federal funds will reimburse us for this work, since the work was necessary not only to address this utility, but also to, as you can see, move it out of the way for a future station area. So the kind of darker orange line is the new Stormwater Tunnel. That's the work that we began. That work is completed. It's just about completed. It's very close to being done. It's completed to the extent that water now runs through the new Stormwater Tunnel. We were able to get that completed last year. These are some pictures of what that looks like. You can see it's a pretty big tunnel. It's a 14 by 12 foot box section. And essentially this is Basset Creek, which, as Robert knows, also runs right under our are going to run under the new bus garage out front. This also is the creek, and it's been kind of captured into a tunnel now. So there's a lot of water that moves through here. It captures a lot of water from Minneapolis. So these are the sections as they went in. Here you can see to the right, that's the old Basset Creek Stormwater Tunnel. It was failing. MnDOT brought about $3.5 million to the project because technically, since this is under Highway 55, this tunnel is owned by MnDOT, so the old tunnel is on the right. That'll fully get removed when the LRT construction takes place. The new tunnel is there on the left. Here they are pouring the final section where it came together. This tunnel, incidentally, is got a stormwater tunnel, and then underneath that, there's a big sanitary sewer tunnel that runs underneath that, built in the 1800s. And so this is some old infrastructure that we worked on. Here we were starting to restore the parking lot out there and put that together. So in essence, what we're asking for today is that this was about a $2.5 million contract. It included our work, which was the majority of it. It also included some work that was added to the contract and funded by Environmental Services in order to put some bypass pipes in as long as we were digging out there. They brought some money to the contract and did that. We then allowed us $242,000 in change order authority, 10% of the original contract value, which is pretty typical. As we went through the process, we hoped and believed that change order authority would be adequate. What you'll find is that we used about 8% of that 10%, or the majority of it, for moving contaminated soils off-site. What we determined when we cracked open the ground and we'd accounted for some contaminated soils, what we found is pretty much everything had to go. And it had to be moved to a landfill because of the minerals and the lead and things like that were in those soils. So, as an aside, we learned from that. We've since modified our civil construction plan and cost estimate for this piece of Highway 55 to. We didn't think this was quite as bad as University Avenue, where everything, including the old streetcar line, ties, rails, and all the dirt that we ever touched on Central Quarter went away. Looks like we're in the same ballpark here. So we're close to the end. We've tried to get to the end of the contract without needing additional change order authority, and we're just not going to quite get there. We have a few change orders for some utilities that there was a water main reconnection, we had to do some manhole work, and we need a few additional dollars to get to that end. So we're asking for 2% of additional change order authority. That's $48,431. It allows us then a total of $290,588. We have that in the budget. We just need to put that together to bring this contract to an end. We're very close. The work that you see out there, if you drive by today, is still finalizing up some environmental services pipes that need to go in. That work's going to be done in about the next week, and we hope to be done, restored, and out of there by the first or second week of September. We'll be completed with that piece. So, in summary, our recommendation is to request authorization for an additional 2% above the authorized 10% for the Basset Creek Tunnel Realignment Project. Questions?
Questions from Councilmember McCarthy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are there any grants or funds that we can apply for in order to offset the money that we're putting in for the contaminated soil?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McCarthy, I don't know that there are. I mean, there are obviously certain funding and PCA pieces that are put together, but it's an eligible, dealing with contaminated soils is an eligible project cost. And so it's not one that's unexpected, but I don't know that, I'm not aware of any of in public works projects. I mean, in development projects, you see that all the time. Developers look for that and receive different grants, but I've not known of it in public works projects. I don't know.
Are there any other questions from committee members? If not, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank
Thanks.
you, Dan.
Thanks.
Next up, we have, first we should decide what goes to consent and non-consent. I would suggest that 2018-182, the Hayward garage contract would be non-consent, and that the Blue Line change order authority would be consent. Is that okay? Next up is the Ridership Report, and Don Harper is here to present.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm here today to present to you the second quarter 2018 ridership for the Met Council. This first slide shows you the trend, the red line being 2018 ridership and the blue line being 2017 ridership, and you can see that we are in the second quarter of this year trending pretty much even with last year. Overall, the year is slightly down from last year, and you'll see that in the numbers I present in the next couple of slides. This slide just shows a representation of the magnitude of the ridership by category, and you see, as is usual, the local ridership is the majority of our rides. Our rail ridership is just over 25%, and then the other modes of service we have make up the rest of the ridership for us. So here are the numbers themselves, and I'm going to read some information off the conclusions slide, which will come up next, but I'll read them to you here or present them to you here as you see the numbers themselves. The workhorses, as I mentioned, the local ridership and the express bus as well are down just about 5%, express being down 7%. The industry trend is that ridership on bus services declining about 2 or 3%. And we, those that do the analysis of the ridership here, think that that's true here, and also that the fare increase is attributing about 2 or 3% to the ridership decline, equaling the 5 to 7%, depending upon the service that we're looking at. It is hard to pull those pieces apart, but we believe that those are the two driving factors in the decline that you see there. Bus BRT ridership is up, and that is primarily due to continued increases in the A line along Snelling Avenue. North Star is up as well, and I've presented over the last couple times saying that when Interstate 94 north of downtown Minneapolis was under construction, and quite a few people were driven to the North Star service, and those folks have stayed with our service. And so this is probably the last quarter where we'll see that increase reflecting those riders staying with us. But we are keeping those riders, and so that is up. Metro Mobility, let me talk about Transit Link as well, because since we were talking about the fare increase, Transit Link has been greatly impacted by the fare increase. As I presented last quarter as well, Transit Link fare prior to the fare increase had a base rate of $2.25 fare, and with the fare increase, and that was equal to the regular route service fare, and we changed the Transit Link fare structure to equal Metro Mobility's fare, and so that is more in the range of $4. And so a lot of people who had a choice in our Transit Link program have gone to using other things. A lot of people were using Transit Link instead of their personal car in some cases, or getting rides with friends in some cases. And because that is an expensive service, it's not such a bad thing to see the ridership decline on Transit Link. We do like to see it go up, but if people have other ways of getting around in the more rural areas of the region, like I said, that is an expensive service for us to provide. We have seen a decline in the van pool service that wasn't impacted by the fare increase. That is just down from last year. We've got a number of folks looking at that program and seeing what ways that we might make adjustments to it. And so that is under review. So the rail ridership is up, and that really is bucking the trend of the fare increase. And so that is a very good news for us. The North Star ridership, as I mentioned, is up. The BRT ridership is up. So there are a number of trends going up. Metro Mobility ridership continues to grow. We saw leveling off for about 3 or 6 months late last year. And with the fare increase, the ridership changes really aren't due to fare increase so much as it is due to service quality. And we have been keeping our service quality up over the last 6 months, 9 months, and so we're seeing people continue to use Metro Mobility, even though the fare went up on that service late last year as well. So that shows that is a service that is very much needed in the region and very well utilized. So most of the points here in the conclusions are points that I've made while we looked at the numbers. And so I will be open to questions as I can answer them, or maybe others here can answer as well if you have them.
Other questions from committee members? Councilmember Shriver.
Yes. Madam Chair, members, I'm embarrassed to ask this question, having served this long on this committee. But can you again explain to me the difference between bus rapid transit and express? Because there's 4% positive, but 7% negative on express. Will you explain what that service is to the customer, to me?
Certainly, Madam Chair and Councilmember Shriver. Express service is primarily, it is a commuter service primarily. It is a service where we essentially bring people in from suburban areas into the downtown primarily, the two downtowns, and the U of M during the rush hours, take them home at night. So long distance, closed door kind of service from suburban areas. The BRT, the Bus Rapid Transit Service, is really two different types of service that we operate. We have the Red Line, which is Cedar Avenue in Dakota County, and which is a highway BRT type service. We have the A Line, which is primarily on Snelling Avenue between Roseville, and it goes over to the 46th Street station. Those both run all day, two direction. The A Line is along Snelling Avenue, so it is in the heavy core of our service area where there is density and use, a lot of generators for that service. And so what is happening, I believe, on the A line, and Mr. Lamb might talk to this as well, is we increase the service quality by making a faster trip up and down Snelling Avenue, and people have responded by coming to the A line and using transit in that core area. And because it's an all-day both direction, people can make a lifestyle choice around it. And so it is very different in nature than the rush hour express kind of service.
Thank you. One makes stops, the other one doesn't.
Yes, yeah.
Councilmember Munt.
Madam Chair, John, I'm wondering if there are industry trends away from van pooling and carpooling. The reason I ask is the Star Tribune did a story, I think it was last week, about the city of Minneapolis building the ABC lots to incent carpooling, but carpoolers aren't filling those lots, so they're looking at yielding some of that space for bicycles, for example. Is what we're seeing with van pooling a trend, or is that something we can change?
Madam Chair and Committee Member Munt, I don't have a good answer for that today. I can take that back and review that. We've not done a lot of comparison against other regions and the trends going on in those other regions. So I can take that with me and bring you back an answer.
Councilmember Munt.
Madam Chair, I'm just, when we're talking a lot about shared mobility and how to plan for the future, we need to figure out what do we do with our existing parking lots that may be overbuilt. And to me, answering that question is really important as we move forward.
General Manager.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilmember Munt, I think you're absolutely spot on. And what we're moving into, I'll say, a mobility era where transit and transportation choices need to be accentuated in a new and different way. And so I think both with van pooling, traditional model of van pooling, and the traditional model of carpooling, in some ways need to be kind of modernized in terms of how we package and how we, give people multiple choices. And for instance, the ABC ramps, traditionally the fee charged for monthly is for parking exclusively. Kind of broadening that thought to say, well, some people could use transit and would use transit on some days and need to use their cars on other days, or carpooling being the same kind of equation. So how we, I'll say, think about rebundling some of these transportation options is directly where we need to go. And so we need to look at both the traditional market, who continues to use it, but also how we can kind of attract new riders and what sort of perhaps policy obstacles or other kinds of things need to be considered. And I know that is in place for both carpooling but also van pooling. So I think over the course of even the next few months, you can anticipate the Transportation Committee getting some more detailed presentations about how we'd like to move forward in kind of a shared mobility sense, and kind of set the path for the future.
Yes, actually, Nick and I had a meeting about it today, and also spoke to Brian about it. And van pooling is increasing in some other regions, but here in our region, I agree with looking at it and modernizing it, and also, but in our region, really, even though there's lots of complaints about congestion is not as bad as other regions. Parking's pretty readily available. Parking is not as expensive as other regions. So it is one size doesn't fit all. Is that the expression? But I'll let Nick give some more details about van pooling.
Madam Chair, yes, we also will see in the next few months, we've got some proposals through the regional solicitation that are looking at exactly what General Manager Lamb was talking about with there's different types of parking passes that kind of blend this carpooling or transit pass into one. One using the ABC ramps, I think, will be received probably pretty well in that process to kind of move that forward. And so I think there's a lot being thought about that. And then the shared use work we're doing in the region, these are questions that are coming up, and I think there's a lot of opportunities. And also some van pool options we'll bring forward as some ways to, I'd say, modernize some of our policies around that.
if I might,
Manager Lamb.
Madam Chair, just to give an update, just this week, we are in the process of finalizing what we hope are the finalists for our mobility manager position, and I think that will really help us kind of solidify some actions associated with some of these strategies.
Are there other questions? I actually attended the ABC Ramp Symposium, and I thought it was excellent, and really some very good ideas for creating more of a mobility hub there. So lots of, and they are partnering with Metro Transit, so I'm very grateful to our staff for working on that. Next up is Metro Mobility Update, and Christine is here to present.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for having me today. So I am Christine Kennan, the Senior Manager of Metro Mobility, and I'm here to give you an update of things going on with our Metro Mobility program, to include an update on our service delivery and some key performance indicators, as well as a few projects and program improvements that we have that our staff is working on. Starting with the service update, through June of 2018, we've seen a pretty consistent increase of ridership over the first 2 quarters of 2017, increasing our ridership 6% over same period last year. And you might remember in the first period of 2017, we had a kind of an unusual flat ridership growth compared to the previous year, but the 2018 figures so far are restoring our ridership gains to what had been, previously projected from a historical perspective, as well as a budget perspective. And we do anticipate that that would 6% gain over 2017 would likely continue as the year goes on. But our providers, from a service delivery and service quality standpoint, have been able to keep up with that increased demand, largely due to what I think is what we've seen as a stabilization of the workforce, driving workforce, following the $2 per hour minimum wage increase hiring that we put in place last fall. Our system-wide on-time performance over same period last year is up to 97.6%, and that's compared to a national FTA standard of 90%. Our system-wide appointment time performance is at 91.6%, which is compared to an FTA standard of 90%. And Metro Mobility system-wide on-time performance for on-board time, maximum on-board time for any individual rider is 95.5%, and that's compared to a national standard of 95%. So we're seeing our providers really be able to produce with service on the street, even with the increased ridership. In addition to the $2 hour wage increase, we've implemented a couple program improvements, one of which is a weekly on-time performance tracker that allows our providers to see by customer and by trip any patterns in individual routings that are exceeding the on-time performance threshold in each of these 3 areas. And also our program administrators are meeting with their providers since earlier this year, really focusing on that, improving that on-time performance for appointment times, really seeing that had slipped quite significantly and was, some of the reasons for some of more common customer complaints was missing their appointment time, as you can imagine. So we wanted to make an improvement, and pleased to say that we've been able to do so. I also wanted to update the committee on our agency service transition. As you remember, in April, I was here providing information to this committee and then later to the full council about transition in our agency contract. The current contract expires in September, provided by First Transit, and begins on October 1st with our new provider transit team. We took the opportunity at the time to restructure our agency service and making some program changes that allowed our contract to align more consistently with the demand system. And particularly, we restructured the contract to provide service to agencies just within the ADA service area. We transitioned smaller agencies and agencies that were outside the ADA service area to our demand contracts. And we added larger volume agency locations to the contract that were within our ADA service area, but that had not been part of the previous scope. We also introduced an onboard payment model in order to meet FTA guidelines about onboard payment versus direct billing to agencies. We'll be staging that transition over the course of 3 weeks, from September 17th through October 8th, and that will allow us to really manage that transition well for all agencies, making it as seamless as possible for our customers and our program managers. As far as a transition plan, we're tracking very well. The slide shows 3 significant categories that we're tracking for readiness: personnel, equipment, and agency support. From a personnel standpoint, both transit team and our incumbent provider have been focused on this for a couple months now, and have both expressed deep commitment to ensuring we deliver high-quality service to our customers with a seamless way to provide high quality all the way through the last day of the current contract to day one of the next contract. To meet the terms of the contract, transit team is hiring frontline staff of up to 83 operators and 4 mechanic technicians. They began an active outreach with incumbent drivers in May and June, and held 2 open houses reaching out to First Transit drivers in particular. And they've been honoring their commitment to pay the incumbents' current rate of pay and honor their years of service and seniority. To date, all 16 incumbent drivers who have submitted applications to transit team have been hired or in the final stages of hiring. First Transit has held meetings with their drivers beginning in May and throughout June and July, discussing the transition of the agency work to transit team. And earlier this month, they held meetings with all their drivers regarding work available at other locations, and their local recruiter is speaking with their drivers individually as well. They report some drivers have already made commitments to other locations, and many are getting their CDL into work in order to work other contracts. To support the need for additional applicants, transit team has continued robust recruitment efforts and has contracted with staffing agencies under a direct hire contract, which has proven successful. In addition, they've been an active participant at job fairs, and were recently asked to speak at the Veterans Job Search Group for the Minnesota Workforce Center, which has produced additional driving candidates and maintenance technicians. So to date, transit team is reporting they've nearly filled all their positions, tracking over 85% of all the required positions filled. From an equipment standpoint, the service will require a fleet of 104 buses, of which 72 will be new, that are replacing retiring vehicles, and 32 that will be transferred over from First Transit. Those procurements and deliveries are tracking on schedule, and all inspections will be completed by the start of service. We're also tracking the procurement and installation of all the onboard technology, the radios, cameras, the driver terminals, et cetera. And we've established plans with our contractor for that installation. And we're adding a dispatch station and 3 additional reservation stations in Minneapolis, and those systems are already in place. From an agency support standpoint, Metro Mobility staff, including myself, my managers, program administrators, as well as Transit's team, have held in-person meetings beginning in June and continuing, working with all the agencies, not just those transitioning to a different provider under the agency contract, but especially those that are transitioning their customers to the demand system. We've been conducting a detailed review of every standing order, every routing for each customer going into those agencies, and we've created master ride templates that all our contractors are working from, so that all the standing orders that are currently in the system are matched as closely as possible, and so we'll have a seamless transition for our riders beginning in mid-September. We've engaged with Leading Age Minnesota in our outreach as well. Leading Age is the region's largest association of organizations serving Minnesota seniors. They actually reached out to us and offered a partnership, and so I was able to visit with them and produce a webinar in June that was very successful with a number of the agency staff attending. And then this coming Friday, holding in-person meetings at Leading Age, along with staff from each of our providers in their demand system to answer more detailed questions and make sure that we're resolving any latent fears that might result from the upcoming change. So I'm looking forward to that. Moving on to other areas of our program, staff from Metro Mobility, IT, and our communications team, along with our trapeze vendor, are also very busy this month supporting what will be a relaunch of our online booking system. and that will be with a new and improved version of the interface for the customer interface, and it'll be compatible with the latest version of Trapeze that we just cut over to in June of this year. And so with this application, our customers will be able to request their rides online with a link through our website or via their mobile device, smartphone or tablet, which will eliminate the need for them to call their provider or reservationist for booking. Customers will also be able to make changes or cancel ride requests as well. And we're really excited about this because it's one of the more common calls to our reservationists is just asking, where's my ride, and wanting to make changes. Including with this module is a Where's My Ride application. So a customer using this app who has booked a Metro Mobility ride will be able to see their bus approaching their location, much like you would with an Uber or a Lyft app. And so we're excited about that, as well as a module that it will connect to, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is called Trip Broker. As far as a timeline and status of the online booking, we are in the process right now. Our technical staff is going through and testing the version that's on our test server. And then we will be organizing a group of power users and interested parties, including members of TAC, to test the version with a soft launch in production beginning August 27th. With that success, we will target a public launch in mid-September and have already created copy for our fall newsletter that talks about this launch, so we're confident with it. What's exciting about the Trip Broker part of Trapeze, it's something we already own but have really never fully implemented, and what this will allow us to do is customers who are booking a Metro Mobility ride, but maybe that ride is delivered by our taxi option, we'll be able to see the booking all the way through to the delivery of the service with the Trip Broker product. And we're working with Trapeze on some development opportunity that will allow that to show up in the Where's My Ride feature of the online booking app as well. So that provides some exciting options for those customers that are using the taxi option or any other kind of supplemental service option that we have. And then lastly, I wanted to update you on where we're at with our fixed route incentive pilot. I think I might have mentioned this committee at some point earlier this year that we were launching a project to explore a potential pilot where we'd have some of our conditionally eligible Metro Mobility customers book rides to either the Brooklyn Center Transit Center or the Maplewood Mall with the idea that they would connect to a fixed route bus at that time, and the incentive would be a free ride on Metro Mobility if that ride was including that transfer, and then a free ride on Metro Transit as well. So we had a project team working on this, multi-departments in Metro Transit, as well as Metro Mobility, and we identified these two locations based on the scope of the span of service and the frequency of service and the potential for improvements with the Sea Line and other access to Mall of America, and created a travel shed around these locations, called all our conditionally eligible customers who might be served by a program like that, and kind of came up with some disappointing results. We had drafted a set of customer or survey questions really going to customers' familiarity with the fixed route system, their appetite for participation, how frequently they already rode, and their perceived barriers on the fixed route system. And quite a number of people, we reached out to over 200, and quite a number of people just didn't have any interest. We did have 25 customers that were willing to participate in a program like that, but that small number caused us to kind of regroup our purpose, our goal of the project, and we spoke internally and decided instead, especially since these 25 people for the most part had already used the fixed route system, ranging from twice weekly to monthly, and weren't so interested in the transfer idea. We decided to kind of divorce the idea of having to transfer to the fixed route in order to get a free Metro Mobility ride, and just simply provide these customers a free ride on Metro Transit and anywhere they wanted to go, and broaden our geographic area to include the 46th Street Station as well, to kind of give that like urban, more urban, local, and access to the Blue Line, Mall of America Airport as part of the project. And so we included those customers in our outreach, and now we're up to 50 people that have conditional eligibility on Metro Mobility, have some familiarity with fixed route, but could ride more, a range of perceptions for barriers. And so we've decided to make it focused around a kind of a robust market research kind of pilot, where we're going to follow up with them monthly, ask some of these questions, provide travel training to them, and then that would inform what could be an improved travel training program, give us more insight on our conditional eligibility process, what works and what doesn't as far as using the fixed route system, and kind of go from there. So we are targeting by the end of next month that we'll have all these customers with a all-you-can-ride pass in their hand, have been outreached and kind of connected to Metro Transit's customer advocacy program, and really a pattern where we're reaching out to them with ongoing surveys. And so I think, yep, that's it for my broad update.
Other questions from committee members? Councilmember Dorfman.
I just want to follow up on this last item. So do we have a sense of what percent of our riders who use Metro Mobility that have the capability to use fixed route?
Right, that can be best, Madam Chair, Member Dorfman, that can be best, I guess, answered with just the percentage of our customers that have conditional eligibility, some type of conditional eligibility as part of their certification, and that's up to 40%. So it is significant. There's a broad range of conditional eligibility, and so I think the most opportunity here are for those that have an accessible path of travel as their condition, or maybe night blindness or things like that, where they may quite easily be able to use a fixed route during some parts of the day.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Madam Chair. I first want to take the moment I see the owners here to thank them for their progress on all of this. And then I have a couple questions. One, am I correct to say that we provide the vehicles for this? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so what happens with the previous vehicles that we gave the previous provider? I remember, I thought I heard you say there are 72 new vehicles and then another 30-something old vehicles. Was that from the previous provider?
Madam Chair, Member McCarthy, they were due for retirement. We tend to procure vehicles similar to a schedule of our contracts, and so they were set to retire anyway, and so they're just part of our retiring fleet.
Councilmember Munt.
Madam Chair, Christine, I'm really impressed with all the improvements, and I especially like with the on-time performance that we're able to see if we're getting people to their appointments on time and how much time are they spending on the bus. To be able to see that breakdown, I find that really helpful. I'm also curious if, let's say somebody is really old and they don't have a smartphone, are they still going to be able to get a human being to talk with them if they can't do the online boarding?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilmember Moat, absolutely. We are not changing anything as far as the structure of our access to our reservationists. What we're doing is reintroducing what had been available 2 years ago with just a better product. Customers had been able to go online and book rides and cancel rides. Now what Trapeze is able to provide with that same model or module is much improved and allows that smart feature as well. So customers who do use that have that added functionality with what is roughly the same product, which is called PassWeb.
Are there further questions? I love the idea of the "Where's my ride?" I know. I use that text to find out where the bus is all the time, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up is the State Fair Marketing and Service update. And Adam and Greg are here to present.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much. My name's Adam Mell. I am Market Development Specialist for Metro Transit Marketing.
Madam Chair, council members, or committee members, I'm Greg Tuvison, Assistant Manager, Street Operations.
We'll start off by talking about the new creative, which you see here on this slide. We've been running some ads over the past few years that use photographs, various elements of the fair, multiple treatments that would vary between the items that we printed or advertised. This year we went in a different direction. We decided to change it up and go with a single treatment that would be seen across all media. And what you see is the base right there at the top of the page. We went with something that really we thought evokes the fair with your blue ribbon tradition. We also did something that's a little more subtle that maybe some will like, some might not notice, but the message still gets across. It's done in the style of crop art. So if you're a fan of crop art, it's pretty obvious. But if you don't know crop art or you're not a fan of it, you still get the message. So we thought that was very important. Talking about last year, just to kind of recap, we carried 16.4% of all visitors to the state fair. That is just on Metro Transit's routes. That does not count the suburban providers, nor does it count the state fair shuttle service. So getting to the state fair on transit, whether it's our service or the others, is a very important part of the fair. We carry a large portion of that, and customers throughout the region like to get there by not driving. So there's a great market for us to take advantage of. 654,048 rides was the total number for the year. This year, we're hoping to maintain that number, and if we can at all, grow it as well. As Greg will get to in a moment, there are some service changes that are going to make that a challenge, but we're confident that with some great service and improvements in payment and things like that, we'll be able to keep that service going strong. So real quick, fares once again remain $5 cash for that round trip fare. We are offering discounted bus bargain tickets online through our interactive ticketing tool. That's something that's for sale now through the 22nd, the day before the fair. Customers are able to go online and purchase a single ticket for $4.50 or a group ticket of 2 for $9, or they can get the largest discount by getting a group ticket of 4 for $15, which saves them $5 over the normal $20. Again, after the 22nd on the 23rd, prices go back to normal. Whether they buy them via cash or interactive ticketing, they're going to be paying that $5 per ticket. We are once again offering fares on the mobile app. That ticket is discounted now through the entirety of the fair. So customers are still able to get that discounted rate. The idea being that we want to push more and more people off of cash. It's an expensive form of payment for us to handle. We have to count it. We have to maintain the fare boxes. And with the amount of money that we put through those fare boxes, the fare boxes take a real beating throughout the fair. So the more people we can get to use these services that are digital, the better for us. Additionally, Minnesota Valley Transit Association will also be using bus bargain tickets and the mobile app to collect fares as well, which is great. Again, more users to download the app, more users using our digital tools like interactive ticketing, the better for us. Greg?
Sorry. This year we'll have 20 express sites, and some of the changes for those, many of you are aware, is that 9 a.m. weekdays start at most locations, noon start weekdays at Parade Dunwoody, Newport weekend and holiday only, and then Oakdale is weekend and holiday only. Weekdays for Oakdale, we're encouraging them to go to Maplewood and use that transit center. Our regular route service is the A-Line, very popular, along with routes 3 and 84, and we enhanced the 84 for the expected overloads. Route 960 is a 9 a.m. start time on weekdays and 8 o'clock, well, earlier than that, even on the weekends for some of the staff members that got to get to the fair. So,
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Dorfman.
The Parade Dunwoody stop.
Did we eliminate that last year? No, I thought we had.
Madam Chair, Member Dorfman, no, we had Parade Dunwoody last year.
Okay.
The only change is the weekday noon start.
Member Dorfman, Madam Chair, if I can interject too, you might be thinking of how we eliminated it as an overflow location. We used to use Dunwoody and market it as overflow for County Road 73 in particular and a few of the other northern and western sites. And due to the traffic at Dunwoody, we found that that was not possible because it was full with regular users. In addition to our state fair service where customers get to ride Metro Transit to the fair, we also have outreach events at the fair as well. One of our primary ones, the grandstand booth, where we offer transit information. We have transit information services. We have Southwest Project Office and a lot of great information to help customers find out what's upcoming. This year we'll be featuring the fall campaign, the driver hiring, and then the C line as the primary information items on the backdrop display to help get the word out for all of those. In addition to our outreach at the Eco Experience through the Kick Gas booth. That's a booth where we work with other partners in mobility here in the Twin Cities region, whether that's Nice Ride or Our Car, MnDOT, people like that, teaching visitors how they can make an environmental impact by choosing modes of transit that are sustainable. Additionally, too, I know some might know our Mark Furman and his children are pictured, a frequent grandstand visitor and guest who's retiring soon. So we wanted to have him in here as well, as he was a big part of the grandstand booth. To go over the marketing that we're going through, we're really trying to get the word out, of course, as always. Our state fair brochure, 65,000 of those are distributed throughout the region leading up to the fair. A number of them are mailed out to pre-purchase buyers for state fair tickets. Anyone who buys from the state fair themselves, they get mailed their tickets along with one of our brochures. We're doing advertisements in both Minneapolis and St. Paul Skyways. A direct mail going out to users to encourage people to use the Maplewood Mall, especially with Oakdale closing down in that region for weekday service. We want to make sure people are aware of that Maplewood Mall location. There's a lot of space. It's a really nice facility with a lot of covered shaded parking, and we want to make sure we fill that up in light of the changes to Oakdale. Email campaigns, we're doing a lot of those. One thing we've started to do in the last few years is look at ticket sales. We've looked at sales through interactive ticketing, and now since we have a year of app sales behind us, we're able to look at what sites our tickets are purchased from and contact those users. So particularly for customers of Newport, we want to let them know about this new service. We've got an email scheduled to go out for that. We are also contacting folks of Cottage Grove to let them know about the Newport changes, and in a few other places, Dunwoody as well, to let people know about the changes to that. And then we also email every single person who purchased an online ticket, whether it's through the app or through interactive ticketing. We sent them an email letting them know about discounted ticket availability. Plus, we send out an email to every single app user to let them know that they can purchase their state fair tickets as well at a discounted rate. Sidewalk clings at various transit stations we have along the Blue Line and Green Line. We have information about connecting to the 960 through light rail. We have information about connecting to the A line through light rail on those clings, as well as some more general ones at stations that don't connect to those lines. Online ads, we're doing a lot through our marketing firm Clarity Coverdale Fury, doing some targeted advertising. We're also working with our app provider Movil, who is helping us do some targeting and trackable online ads. So we'll be able to tell what customers are seeing, what ad, watch them if they download the app, purchase a state fair ticket, and watch that behavior throughout. It's pretty exciting, and it's a good way to tell if our advertising is effective and allowing us to adjust on the fly and target better. Of course, we're taking advantage of our robust transit fleet with on-vehicle advertising through interior cards, bus side ads, etc., and then digital billboards in key corridors to help let people know about the transit service as well.
Okay, we're going to have a different look at the State Fair Transit Center this year. Those horizontal banners that have been known to my eyes for many years in this as an operator and whatever are going to have a vertical look to them. I don't know how many remember last Labor Day evening, there was a pretty good storm front that came through, and one of those gate banners blew over. Nobody was hit, nobody was injured, but it gives us an opportunity to look at, we saw the need for a safer banner. So each end of each gate will have a vertical banner. It will move with the wind, and it will be double-sided with what what gate you're at, along with the number gate at the very top. They'll be just as high and should be quite visible to those customers who are coming up from the fair to get to their bus location. The only small changes we have made, Newport wasn't in the plan until recently, so I moved some stuff around to make the converging bus movements from gate 2 and gate 3 to the inner ring loop. It got to be a pinch point, so I just moved Bloomington to gate 4, where Newport not Newport. Newport was at 7, but I digress. Everything moved 1, and we had single gate for everybody. Well, with the redoing the service for Newport on weekend and holiday, they are going to share gate 10 with Cottage Grove due to its regional location. In case somebody might get on the wrong bus, you're right down the road. So that's a good fit, and it's in the straight line where there's no pinch point. And the Route 960 does remain in its front location in gate 6. Our estimated number of buses for weekdays, AM 60 and PM 73, and of those out on the street, 58 of those are articulated. Weekends and holidays, 74 in the AM, 81 in the PM, and 65 of those buses are articulated. Our support staff, this is a big effort from operators all the way up through operations, marketing, etc. Total estimated hours are 5,316. From Metro Transit staff, this includes site captains, flaggers, we got them all. Bus operators, the total estimated number of hours were nearly 12,000. And our express service costs are covered by the collected revenues, and no subsidy is required to operate this express service. And we're not clicking. Any questions?
Councilmember Dorfman.
So with the shortage of operators, how do we manage this for the state fair?
Madam Chair, Member Dorfman, the 9 o'clock start time gets most of our operators through the morning rush, where then they are then able to operate that service. That's going to be the big, yeah.
Are there further questions? Councilmember Mike.
Madam Chair, Adam, I love the crop art. It is quintessential Minnesota. And Greg and Adam, I want to thank you guys in advance. I know 650,000 rides is a really, really heavy lift. And thanks for the sacrifices you'll make.
Thank you.
Councilmember, Madam Chair, I want to give credit to our designer, Leah Jans, who came up with the design. She's really takes the credit for that, so.
Are there further questions or comments? I have one. Newport was added later, and I'm wondering, you may have covered this, and I apologize. I did hear about the email. Are we pushing it out on social media as well?
Madam Chair, we will be doing some social media communications. We're also going to be doing rider alerts to regular route riders for both Newport and Cottage Grove as well. As you mentioned, the email as well. We also are in the process of creating a flyer to put on the windows of everyone who uses those 2 park and ride locations. So we're doing what we can to make sure we get people aware of the service.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. I also echo Councilmember Mont's comments. We appreciate that, going above and beyond to do this service for you. Next up is the bus barrier pilot update.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Christy Bailey. I'm the Director of Bus Operations.
And I'm Matt Dake, Director of Bus Maintenance.
And we're very pleased to give you an update on our barrier pilot at Metro Transit. By way of background, just so you remember, in 2017 with the ATU contract, a part of that was a letter of agreement that included a labor management committee to look at a bus barrier pilot. As part of the committee, it required that we have 5 elected Transit Safety and Security Committee members that were elected at their home garages by their peers as part of the committee. as well as 2 bus operators and 1 mechanic tech from each garage that was selected by ATU, including Ryan Timlin, the president of ATU, or his designees, along with the manager of safety and representatives from transit police. We currently have 2 lieutenants that participate with us. And of course, Matt Dacre, his representative, and myself are on the committee. We have been meeting monthly since April, and the committee is very robust and engaged. We take our leads from the members. They pretty much dictate how this is going to run, and we're there to advise and answer questions, take notes, and make sure they have meeting minutes every month. We talk about the deployment strategies, and when we first started, it changed a little bit. When we first started, the committee really wanted every operator in the system to have the ability to try out a barrier. And that while that is still happening, the committee also understands that for operators who've had assaults recently or have come back from being out after an assault, the ability for them to come back and have a barrier for a week or 2 is something they support, and we've done that. Additionally, they are supportive of certain garages with owl work to have a couple of barriers put aside for the owl operators who work, at latest at night, overnight, and with maybe fewer staff members around to assist them. We update the committee every month on whether or not, how many operators have been able to experience it, what routes. We share customer feedback with them as well. And after our second meeting, we invited Eric Lind from Strategic Initiatives, who's here today, to join us to talk about what an evaluation survey would include. And he met with us several times before we actually deployed a survey, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. As you know, or may not know, since March, we've had about 21 barriers in place. More recently, and my partner Matt will talk about, we've added another one, but he'll talk about that. And since that time, in March 2nd, when we started actually evaluating these, we've had 1,289 unique operators assigned barriers. And basically, it's done at the markup desk, except for those few exceptions I mentioned. We've had 120 routes represented so far, and that's pretty good considering we have about 130 routes in our system. And the top Minneapolis routes are the ones, and the St. Paul routes are the ones that get the most calls for service. The 5, the 21, 19, 22, and 2 are the top ones for Minneapolis, and St. Paul, of course. The 64, 63, 74, 68, and 71 have had the barrier the most often.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the different styles of barriers. There's basically 2 styles in the industry. Either a barrier you have to use all the time, or a barrier that gives you the option to use it or not use it. And we've deployed both those styles in our fleet. So this first slide here shows the Aeroguard brand of barrier. And we first installed 20 of these back in March of this year, and they're at all the garages. And then we have one you see it says with extended glass. What the extended glass is, it's an extension of the glass protection that the operator is given. So in the picture there, you can see there's a 2-piece glass, and that slides on a horizontal plane, and they can slide it back to open it or slide it forward for protection. With the extended glass Aeroguard, it's a fixed piece of glass, but it gives a much further extension towards the windshield. But it's fixed. It doesn't give the option to slide, and you can't have the door open. It has to be closed in the Aeroguard style of barrier. Also, the Aeroguard is the approved operator barrier for Gillig, one of our OEMs. It's the one they approved for their vehicle in the non-extended glass model. Some of the concerns with extended glass is you get reflection, possibly in low light situations when headlights from oncoming cars are coming, and it hits that barrier. It can cause reflection in the operator's eyes and give possibly some low visibility for the operator for blind spots and such. So Gillig has expressed somewhat of a concern with that. So they have approved the non-extended glass at this point. Some of the feedback we've gotten from the operators through the committee and some conversations within the garages is this particular barrier is too hard to open. The glass doesn't provide enough coverage, hence going to the extended glass version to give that a try. And they feel constrained once they're sitting in the operator seat. So the next style here is what we're referring to as the Dutch door. It's a split door design, and this gives the operator the option to have the top piece pinned all the way back 180 degrees. So just the bottom black section you see there, the metal piece, would have to be closed, but the glass can be pinned back at 180 degrees. This is at East Garage, and we just got this installed in July. It will go on tour to all the garages, so the different garages get to try it out, and many different operators get to see how they like this particular barrier. This one, the glass coverage is not as far as the extended glass Aeroguard I just discussed, but that could be looked at in the future. This is the vapor barrier, which is our first barrier that was put in place December of 2017. We have 4 more on order, which we hope to be getting here in the next week of this month. This one is kind of hard to see in the picture, but there's a roll-up window, like a power window that goes up and down vertically. So the operator can roll it up and down with a power motor, and also has a fan in place that provides some cooling for the operator. So some of the feedback we've gotten is it's sturdy. It does provide pretty good protection. The glass on this one does go pretty far forward towards the windshield, providing a little more coverage than the other ones. And it does not obscure the view of the obstruct the view of the mirrors in the bus. This one we'll refer to it as swing door design because it's not a 2-piece door. That upper piece, which is at basically the seat cushion level, can swing all the way back, which gives the operators the option to use it or not use it. This one, we have 2 on order, which we're hoping to get this week. We confirmed with Bentech that they had shipped the barrier this past Friday. So we're hoping it comes around Wednesday and we can start doing the installation and then have that go to the different garages to see how the operators like this one. The operators have expressed in the committee they have a real interest in seeing this particular barrier, so we're hopeful that this is something that they find that they like.
So committee feedback thus far. When we first started out meeting, we heard loud and clear that the Aeroguard barrier was not meeting their expectations for the reasons stated before. Not enough protection, especially for operators that were maybe shorter and had to pull their seat closer to the steering wheel. It seemed like that whole area was open, and we actually did have a documented assault with one of those barriers. The driver did have the window back, however, so it was even more open. That's something drivers can decide to do or not to do. Additionally, we had some late pullouts because drivers felt, I don't need the barrier, I'm claustrophobic, I feel confined. One of the operators on our committee said, I'm too fluffy for this barrier, it's just not enough space for me. We have also heard, of course, that there's not enough air ventilation. They feel they can't do good customer service if they've got a barrier there. So it's a variety of comments. But many operators feel a barrier is necessary, and that came out in our survey. So the initial conclusions from the first survey, and the survey was really driven by, again, the committee members themselves, the bus operators on the committee. Eric Lynn did a great job of listening to their concerns and put together a survey that allowed them to express whether or not they would ever use one, what style they would prefer, what type of barrier would be their ideal barrier, and then some basic information about their years of service, etc. So most operators really want at least an option to use a barrier. And as Matt said, the idea, when they first saw the Bentech photos, they're like, this is the barrier we really want. This is the one we want. When our committee saw the LA barrier pictures only at the Dutch door style at our last meeting in July, they're like, this is the one we really want. So, once we have them deployed for a while, we'll be able to do another survey. Again, they don't want to disrupt their driving in any way. They're very concerned about safety, and any kind of glare or anything that would obstruct their vision is something that would not be acceptable to them. Many operators feel that the current barriers will not prevent liquids, And they want something that will prevent liquids from being thrown at them or thrown over the barrier. But they understand that probably the only way to prevent that is to have a solid door. And again, they really want to provide good customer service, and they really don't want to be shut away from their customers as well. So there's a little bit of a conflict there. Operators who have experienced harassment or assault or worry about that are the ones in our survey that came out as the ones who really do want to have a barrier of some kind. We deployed about 2,000 surveys the end of June, and we got about a third of them back, which is a pretty good result. And we feel that the first survey results are pretty solid from what we found out. Additionally, we'll be doing another survey after we have the 2 new styles deployed for a while, probably late August or September. So what are our next steps? We're going to continue to meet monthly. Once we get the Vapor and Bentex and the LA barrier on the road and more operators experience it, we'll have a much better idea about how more operators feel about the new styles, because currently, as you know, the Vapor's only at Hayward. We'll do our second survey, and we're going to continue to evaluate, especially the maintenance and cleaning. That was a concern from the operators about fingerprints and, haziness on there from just people touching them and drivers touching them as well. And of course, we're always looking to the industry. What's everyone else doing? Matt's team and my team and our bosses and even the ATU and our drivers are looking to other agencies. What are they? What types of styles do they have? What's the feedback from other operators at other agencies? So we'll continue to do that as well. With that, any questions?
Do committee members have questions? Councilmember Munt.
Madam Chair, Christie and Matt, 2 questions. First, do we have to pick one style of barrier, or could we choose multiple styles? And secondly, I'll let you answer that first.
Madam Chair and Committee Member Munt, that's a difficult question to answer. From the maintenance perspective, less variety is easier for cost, training, and things of that nature. But with that said, and Christy can jump into this as well, if there's a consensus that we could come to that it makes sense, I don't think we're opposed to it. But it is more complicated when you add different pieces, whether it's assigning the vehicles, how do you assign that particular person that bus? Because buses are shared in a lot of the routes. They don't necessarily go on the same line. Like an A line is easy. Those buses are branded and they run that route every day. But when you get into some of the local service, it's based on what's available. So once you start matching operators to barriers and trying to get them pieced onto the right piece of equipment can be very, very challenging. Having some experience, not with the barrier aspect, but having some of that customization, operationally becomes very challenging. That's why I said it was difficult to answer.
And Madam Chair, my second question is, if we put this on one bus, do we need to put a barrier on all buses? Because what I'm hearing is feedback from some drivers who are saying, I drive a safe route, I want a connection to my passengers. All buses or just some?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Munt, I think that is yet to be determined. Certainly, if the drivers feel that there's an option to use the barrier or not, I think that's where we're going to have the most success on going fleet-wide, for example. If the operator knows I can pin it back if I choose to or not, I think that will make a big difference. And I think once we get the 2 new styles out, I think we're going to see a much different story. I really believe that.
Are there any other questions? Thank you very much for the update and for the show and tell before the committee meeting. Our last presentation, the chief has been waiting patiently, is an update from our police department.
Madam Chair, members of the council, committee, pleasure to be here again. our mission has been stated to be protecting our community through innovation and problem solving, and I will tell you that we've just been having lots of conversations within the organization to try and see if we are still on the right mission. That mission was created about 6 years ago when I took over the organization, and so we're doing some reflection in the organization to try and make sure that we're all on the right track. As far as the vision goes, a department that is reflective of and responsive to the community we serve, I can tell you that we are very definitely on the right track in that area. Metro Transit Police Department has 115 full-time officers and 60 part-time officers. When I took over the department, we were at 5% diversity, and we are the only department in the state of Minnesota that's at 50% diversity. We now have 58 of the 115 officers are people of color and or women. And so we have continued to grow the department. As we grow the department, we've grown it to be a more diverse department, a department that speaks more languages and is more responsive to the community that we serve. The 60 part-time officers are one of the challenges we have. On an average week, we are having 42 open shifts, which means about 22-person officers' assignments are not filled on a weekly basis. On average, we're only filling about 50% of the part-time shifts that we have posted. On some days, we can get by without that shift, so that means maybe there's not an extra group of people that are working on a rail assignment, or there's not an extra group of people working at a particular location. But on days when those shifts were response car shifts, we've had to pull officers off of other assignments to cover those shifts because the calls for service do have to get answered. So we have had some real challenges in terms of continuing to meet all of our obligations based on the current deployment. As I mentioned, we are a department that has emphasized diversity, and it's emphasized diversity not just at the operational level, but at all levels. Currently, half of the senior management team are people of color, with Tony Hines now becoming the captain of West. He was promoted in around March of this year. We have an acting captain in East with Rick Grates, because Jim Franklin, although many of you know, was recently assigned and promoted to being the chief of police in Rochester. So we have lots of movement, lots of changes in the organization. 1 out of 6 of the middle managers are people of color or women, and 6 of the 14 sergeants are women or people of color. We have in every category, with the exception of Native Americans, which is the area that we're still concentrating on, but we have not had great success. We've seen significant increases in the diversity of the department. We've increased the number of women in the department by 5 times, 10 times the number of Asian Americans, 10 times the number of African Americans. We've doubled the number of Latinos. So we have continued to develop the department. And for those of my colleagues who say there is no diversity out there, I would beg to differ. This year, we really pushed a sort of a different philosophical approach to the policing. We talked about being the 5 E's of public safety and security, and we challenged all of the managers, supervisors, and officers to really get their teeth into all 5 of these. So traditionally, police departments have said, well, mainly we're an enforcement agency, and what I've said is that's only one small part of what we do at Metro Transit. We are an evidence-based policing agency. We have done great work to make sure that we have the data so that we know where crime is happening, when crime is happening, what types of crime is happening. And now what we've said to the officers, sergeants, and supervisors, you have to put your cops on the dots. You can't it's not enough just to have a map someplace that we all sort of know is there. What I'm looking for on a bi-weekly basis is to see the evidence that you are, in fact, putting people where they need to be. I've also said that engagement is not just Pam Steffen's group or any other group. It is every person in the police department's job to be engaged with the community. And because of that, we have increased the amount of community engagement there. One area that has really been kind of our work in progress is to try and do more with public information, more with social media, more with crime prevention, to try and prevent crime from happening rather than being reactive to it. Marilyn Porter and the folks from facilities and the folks from Chad's group at TCC have been amazing partners in terms of making sure that we're using engineering to also respond to crimes, whether it is porta potties at some of our more challenging locations, TCC and with text to safety, better ComStat. They have been doing a great job of trying to help us do much better at all of our locations. But we do still do enforcement, and we do a significant amount of enforcement. We handle a lot of calls. We're doing uniform preventative patrol. We're still doing about 10% of our shifts are in our plainclothes assignments. We have one of the best investigative units in the Twin Cities, and we are still doing 911, 911 rapid response. That was interesting. There we go. Year to date, we have done 36,000 calls for service. Now, to put this into context, when I came on the job here, we were averaging around 600 calls a month. We now average 6,000 calls per month. So calls for service over the last few years has gone up about 226%. In 2016, we had 56,000 calls for service. In 2017, last year, we had 65,000 calls for service. We'll hit 72,000 calls for service at the current rate if we don't go above that. And that trend is not slowing down at all. And in fact, we're getting new vehicles so we can get even more calls for service. Text for Safety is one of those vehicles. That came in, and that has shown some increased growth. Average calls per day are up to 10. They were, at the beginning of the year when it was first piloted, we were averaging about 5 a day. Now we're up to 10 a day. 85% of those calls come from text users. About 15% use the app. 61% of the text calls for service require a police response. And we've noted that disorderly conduct, drugs, prohibited acts, and sleepers are probably the most frequent calls for service that we get. One new additional piece of this that I'm very excited about is we began pushing about 4 years ago the idea that we were going to do something on what we call street harassment. It is the hey baby, it's the grabbing and touching on a bus or on a train. Those things have become problematic, not just here, but all over the United States. And we began asking the question, could we do a better job with that? Text to Safety was one of the vehicles that we wanted to use to try and do that. And in July of this year, they began tracking harassment calls. And we had 61 reports of harassment brought in through Text for Safety. So we now will have a better vehicle for the young woman who says, I'm feeling bothered, I'm feeling harassed, I don't feel comfortable here, but who doesn't want to pick up the phone, who doesn't want to walk up to the front and talk to the driver about it, but can simply now Text for Safety, give us a location, give us a description, and the officers are responding. And we're currently working with the city attorney, for example, in St. Paul on creating better statutory language or ordinance language, so we'll be able to have better enforcement tools. Right now, a lot of that really sort of sorts into, that's a First Amendment case. He said something, she didn't like it. Where does that line constitutionally drawn? And we're trying to work right now with the city attorneys to try and make a more definitive place in the law that says you shouldn't have to sit next to somebody who's bothering you, who's badgering you, who's beleaguering you there. And so we're trying to create the proper language that will help us address that more effectively.
Chief,
If
quick
you can pause
question.
for a second.
So calls
You're good. Sorry.
calls that are coming that are related to people experiencing homelessness, are they coming from people who are saying there's a guy who's sleeping, or are they coming from people experiencing homelessness saying somebody just stole my phone, whatever? Right.
Madam Chair, Councilman Dorfman, the answer is both. So we still get a significant number of calls in the mornings, particularly in mornings when we have our regular customers coming on and they're finding all of the seats taken up, or somebody's got all of their stuff there, or the seat is wet for one reason or another. And so we get those calls for service. And then in addition to that, we also get calls for service from the homeless that they've been assaulted. We've had 3 criminal sexual conduct cases which involved homeless women who were molested or raped on our property by other homeless men who saw them as vulnerable there. We get a significant number of thefts and some robberies where the homeless are the victims, but they're often sometimes the victimizers. So, and I'll talk about that when I get to homeless a little bit more, but the answer is both and.
Thank you.
As I said, one of our goals is to be more responsive, and so we've really geared up our community engagement, our outreach efforts. Thus far this year to date, we've done 64 community outreach events. That doesn't include National Night Out, where we did hosted our own events at 46th Street LRT platform and also in downtown St. Paul at the Vertical Circulator building over at 5th in Minnesota. We've been doing our juvenile diversion program, which still continues to work. Our Native American outreach seems to be really very active, although I haven't gotten the recruiting results that I'd like out of that, but we're being invited to the Native American Elders Committees. We're now regularly part of their decision-making process. They see us as being valued members at the table, and we're regularly there. We hosted our own iftar this year. For the second year, I invited the Somali community and Muslim community over to the safari, and we broke bread together during the Ramadan period, and that was, I think, very well received. We've done coffee with cops at all of the bus garages so far, trying to make sure that the bus drivers and the officers have a relationship there. Cops and kids, we took them out fishing. Nobody drowned. Everybody got back, which is always sort of a knock on wood thing. And then badges in baseball. This week, in fact, we'll be taking 30 kids to the Saints game. Mike Beck's an old friend of mine, and he was happy to accommodate us trying to get some kids from St. Paul, Minneapolis, and from Little Earth all going to the Saints game this week. Directed patrol, as I said, part of being responsive is being responsive to when there are problems in the system, and we took that 5E approach and applied it to a variety of different locations. We asked the general manager for some additional funding for overtime to do that, and the results, I think, have been really very significant. The primary areas that we've been working at: Brooklyn Center Transit Center, DID, which is the downtown Hennepin Avenue and Nicollet Avenue. It's the general Downtown Improvement District. Lake Street, both Chicago and Lake and Hiawatha, the VCB in downtown St. Paul. But we also did Green Line and Snelling and Union Depot. And in each of those cases, what we've seen is, as we've directed officers patrol using the 5E approach, we've seen dramatic reductions in calls for service. 27% less calls for service at BCTC, down almost half at both of the downtowns. Both came in almost at 50% reduction in calls for service. Same thing at Union Depot. Snelling was a little thin, but Snelling didn't have very many calls for service, as it turns out, although we thought it did because of all of the construction work and all the traffic complaints there. In general, what we've seen calls drop steadily, and we have a plan to do not just this initial push, but to also have for a maintenance plan. So when the overtime money runs out, which it will ultimately do, we need to have a way to hold the property that we have. And so we've talked about, do we need additional full-time officers? Can there be partnerships between, for example, Brooklyn Center and our police department have talked about sharing a joint beat to cover the hours where there was a gap. St. Paul and Transit are also working joint beats in downtown St. Paul, trying to figure out where do the lines converge so that we're not doing their work and they don't have the time or the bodies to do our work, but there is some work that we both share. And so we need to do a better job with that. I mentioned the homeless initiative. I think that's one of the more significant investments in time that we've done this year. A few of you have been at the table as we've been having that conversation. We've had several conversations, and the chair has, in fact, hosted now 2 meetings with service providers and elected officials to talk about homelessness. In 2013, when I first got here, we initiated what I call Operation Deep Freeze, which was simply a humanitarian approach to say that we didn't want anyone to freeze to death on the nights it's the worst out, and so we kept shelters open. We made sure that people that were out and about were serviced. Between 2016 and 2017, we began seeing what we call the unsheltered service. It was a period of time when train operators especially began noticing large numbers of the homeless camping out on the train or in facilities, and we began having assaults on operators. We began having other criminal activity related to that. And then in 2018, we've initiated what we call our Homeless Action Team. This just sort of gives you a breakdown by calls for service. In 2015, we had about almost 1,300 calls for service. Last year, we had 2,400. This year, we're on track for about 3,500 calls for service related to the homeless. And as Councilman Dorfman mentioned, it is a mix of victimization and complaints about sanitation, safety, mental health, and a variety of other things. We are, by the Hennepin County head count, and that's one of the probably the best indicators. We have about 74% of the unsheltered living on the system. So when they went out and they do what they call a point-in-time count, St. Stephen's, in fact, does the point-in-time count, they go out and count all of the folks they can find that are unsheltered. When they did that, in January, they found 257 of them were identified, were either on transit or identified transit as their primary place of abode. In April, that was up to 292. And that number continues to be a moving target that we're talking about. We are looking at ways to address this as it continues to grow. And part of that process is what we've called creating the homeless action team. As we looked nationally to try and figure out, and literally every other chief of police that works the transit system says the same thing. We all have large numbers of homeless on our systems. We are not unique in that at all. But we looked to see who else was doing something significant and something meaningful about it. And we came up with two different systems that were doing two different things. Houston Transit has a homeless action team or a homeless outreach team, which is a partnership with the Houston Police Department, and they pair officers and social workers together to go out and interact with the homeless and then help the long-term homeless and those in crisis get to services. So that seemed like a very workable model, and it seemed, according to Vera Bumpers, who's chief at Houston Metro PD, she said it had been working wonderfully, and it had great support both from the homeless shelter providers and from the police officers as a very viable model. The other group that we talked to that seemed to have a working model was BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit, and in BART's case, what they talked about was using a code of conduct to change the behaviors. They weren't kicking the homeless off. They really weren't facilitating the homeless getting off necessarily. They were simply trying to change the behaviors that were the most disagreeable, like sleeping on the floor, urinating in public, some of the other, those kind of behaviors. Is they use the code of conduct to try and modify that. So we have tried to do a little of both. We are still responding to the customer service complaints and community concerns. We've been working with meetings with Union Gospel Mission, Catholic Charities, all the other providers that we can. We have set up a process and posted a position for 4 officers who would work midnights to work on the HAT team. We had a great response from officers who wanted this. We have identified the 4 officers, and we're ready and about to pull the trigger on transferring them to midnight so that they will be working on this process very early on. And one of the first things they're going to be doing is going out and helping us do a better census of trying to figure out who exactly is on the system and how can we work with them. We have drafted a code of conduct, which was passed out to you. I would love to get your feedback on it. We have not done anything with the code of conduct other than drafted it because we wanted it to get in front of you and the rest of the council so we can make decisions as to, is this moving in the direction that you want one way or another? But we have adopted pieces of code of conduct from LA, Philly, Incepta, Denver, Portland, BART. All of them have codes of conduct that seem to speak to this, and so this is a compilation of the best ideas we found from other transit agencies. We've created a job description for an internal outreach worker. And so that is in play. We've also gotten proposals from 2 of the local social service agencies who could contract with us for outreach workers, and we will have to have a conversation about that shortly. And that is one of our next steps, is to decide whether we're doing an internal posting or doing an external posting in terms of external hiring for the civilian HAT team members. I think that still has to be discussed. We still want to develop the survey and the census of the homeless. We've been working with both sides of the river to try and see what information should we be gathering so that we're comparing apples to apples. Wilder has been doing the homeless survey for probably the longest, so we want to make sure that the information we gather is complementary with Wilder, but it also needs to complement St. Stephen's and the point in time. And frankly, Ramsey County doesn't do a point-in-time count at this point, so it'd be useful to have Ramsey County. And then I'm getting calls from my colleagues down in Dakota County and in Washington County that they also have homeless, and they're very interested in what we're doing also. As I said, the code of conduct policy needs to be approved, and then there are some individual elements that we think really do make some sense that are not conduct policies, they're just more general policies. For example, the all-day pass. The all-day pass is viewed by many of the homeless as meaning when you give me the pass, I have 24 hours that I get to ride. there's not any other agency that does it that way that we can find when we talk to our other transit agencies. The all-day pass is simply a pass that doesn't work during peak hours for most of these other agencies, and it ends at midnight on a day specific. So if you're given the pass today at midnight today, that pass is no longer good. You have to get another pass for the next 24 hours. We need to clarify what our language means, and then we need to educate the homeless community about what the pass is good for when they give them out, because we know that some of the agencies do use all-day passes or tokens or other coupons as a way of giving the homeless an option when they've run out of room at the end. Crime concerns. Last year, we had our first big bump in crime with a 41% increase in Part 1 crimes. Year to date, thus far, we are seeing an 11% reduction in crime. We had 395 at this time last year, Part 1 crimes, which are the most major felonies, and we're at 353 so far year to date. Part 2 crime, on the other hand, is up about 8%, and the differences are disorderly conduct, fights, and then the sleeper calls, which continue to grow also. Offenses against operators, it's really the sort of the tale of two different periods or two different quarters. The first quarter, we had serious assaults against operators, but we had a very few of them. In the second period, we had more assaults on operators, but they were of the less serious kind. They were more disorderly conduct. There were more threats and people yelling and screaming and making threats rather than physical injuries there. We still have a great track record in terms of clearing those. So on the felony assaults, we've had 3, and all 3 of those were cleared by arrest. The gross misdemeanors, we've had 8, and we've made 7 arrests on those. The spits, we've had 15 so far this year, and we've made arrests in a third of those. As you get down toward people yelling and screaming, the clearance rate gets thinner and thinner. We are about 14 arrests out of the 49 disorderly conducts we've had so far this year. Trend line right now is it was up in the first 2 quarters, and now it's starting to flatten out and starting to drop again. But the disorderly conduct, just people being out of control, screaming, making threats, is a trend we're seeing both when it comes to operators and also when it comes to passengers. Both of those areas are up in general. Bus on boards. We moved our goal up to 2750, and we're actually right about that in terms of average. June was an aberration, and July of this year we did 3,000 bus on board. So we are continuing to try and make sure that we're on as many buses as we possibly can be. And once again, working with Christy and Brian Funk, we're also getting better identification on which buses should we be on. So we're on the 5, we're on the 19, we're on the 16, we're on the 21s. We're trying to make sure that the lines where the operators are seeing the most problems are identified for us on a regular basis so that we can make sure that the officers are assigned to ride those buses before they ride some of the easier buses. Nobody's much as riding the express buses. The A-Line may be the one exception of that. So. A-Line, one of our goals this year was to get our fare checks up to 6,500. We've been averaging that, I think, pretty much consistently. In addition to that, we've been doing bus on boards with the A-Lines, and so that's also another 450 on boards as our goal. We did almost 800 of those. This is largely a response to we've been able to use our CSOs, our community service officers. When I first got there, they were these protected little bubbles of glass that nobody ever wanted to do anything with. And what we discovered is that since they're all wannabe cops, we can throw them into not quite the deep end, but we're throwing them out there. We're pushing them out of the nest regularly, and they've done a great job on the North Star. They've done a great job on the A-Line. They do great jobs at the special events, and so we're going to keep seeing how far can we push them. They're taking reports, they're answering calls, but the A-Line checks are really a testimonial to the dedication of the CSOs and them being out there on a regular basis. Green Line, I was specifically asked to try and come up with a better strategy for Green Line this year. It was the line that we had the most criminal complaints and the most quality of life complaints about. And so we did a couple of different things. You'll note that our goal was 1,500, but we did almost 3,300 onboards. That's a result of a program that we started in about March or April, what we called Operation Force Multiplier, where in the morning rush and the evening rush, we put 6-person teams out onto the Green Line to have an additional saturation effect there. Because of that additional presence, we had 409 additional LRT rides. We did 15,000 additional fare checks, and we had 330 additional enforcement activities that took place on the Green Line. Blue Line is probably the next place we should do this. Blue Line did not have an off-on program, and they have struggled to try and keep making their monthly goals. They've had 567 year-to-date fare checks, so they have an enormous amount of fare checks, but they also have their special event centric. And if you have a day when the Twins are playing, or the Vikings are coming up, or the Gophers are playing, and we don't have enough part-time officers to staff the positions there, we end up pulling the people off of the Blue Line to staff that, or we have to pull people in on their days off to staff it on overtime. And so if it's been a quiet day, we may yank the people off of the Blue Line, and that has had a negative impact on our onboards on the Blue Line and also on our fare checks. But our fare checks go up at the other end of this because they're standing at the platform checking everybody as they get on and off of the train. So we get lots of fare checks, but I don't know that we're having the desired presence we want on the trains themselves. Enforcement, as we close out the year, we get to the midpoint of the year, bus on boards, we've done 17,000, rail on boards, almost 30,000, 1.2 million fare checks on the rail system, 61,000 fare checks on the BRRT system. We're still maintaining our regular posts of the downtown Minneapolis, North Minneapolis, downtown St. Paul, and the mall. We've responded to and done over 109 special events. And as I said, we've responded to over 36,000 calls for service this year. It has been busy and continues to get busier. Finally, last but not least, in our soon-to-be home next door, the facility, which we have affectionately referred to as the A.J. Olson Memorial Facility, because we think it may well kill A.J. before it's all over with. But it's up. We got shovels in the ground. We got planks up. We got wiring. We've got conduit running around. We got cement coming in. And while it has been pushed back for occupancy till May of next year, we are very appreciative of the efforts that the council has provided to give us a new home. And we can't wait to get out of West, myself included. So, are there any questions?
Questions from committee members?
Madam Chair, Chief, if a typical citizen came to you and said, I'm thinking about hopping on the bus and train, is it safe to ride transit? How would you respond?
I'd say buses are very, very safe, and trains are very, very safe up until a certain point, and then it is the same answer. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, it's a very similar answer that I used to give when people asked me that question about downtown St. Paul. What's the safest night in downtown St. Paul? It's the night the Wild are playing or the Saints are playing. The more people we have out and about, the safer things are. At 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, if you're the only person, it feels a little scary. The actual victimization isn't that high, but that feeling of unease that you don't see enough cops around, you don't see enough regular people around to feel like you're part of a community of riders makes people very uncomfortable at night. And I get that from regular riders. I get that from hardened city kids like myself who, you're coming back from the airport, you look around and you're the only person on the train and you go, that doesn't feel all that good. No, I don't think it's unsafe. Our crime rate, especially our violent crime rate, is very, very low. It's probably one of the safest places in the Twin Cities to be. But that feeling of unease is what I think most of the customers are responding to. And that's what you hear more about, is that fear rather than actual lack of safety.
Are there other questions or comments? Thank you very much for the update, and also your good work on Aline's effort to have a convening of social service agencies and elected officials. I thought the last meeting was excellent.
Thank you very much. It's been a privilege.
Is there anything else for the good of the cause? Otherwise, we can be adjourned. Thank you.